Good evening, folks. Thank you all for joining. Today, we're honored to be speaking with Mike Austin, a guest of Broadway Community, longtime homeless service advocate, and just an all-around wonderful man. So Mike, I want to hand the floor over to you, give you the chance to introduce yourself. Really looking forward to this conversation.
Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everybody. My name is Mike Austin. Austin, like Texas, Austin. I was born in the Bronx, New York, and raised basically all over the United States. My father was a career military person, and dad basically we traveled a lot. So I come from a middle-class family, which might seem hard to believe when we talk about being homeless, or what I refer to as undomiciled. A friend of mine told me once that words have spells in them. So when you hear certain words, like he was from Britain, he said, Mike, when I hear the word homeless, I think of people like vagabonds or people with desperate, either intentions or issues at hand. They might be alcoholics, drug addicts, what have you. But then he said, when I hear undomiciled, he said, I think of a worldly view, such as people from Earth. That's where we get the term earthling from. So how can you be homeless if the earth is your home? And he said, undomiciled is such a more prettier word if you think about it. He said also, if you say unemployed in the United States, he said, in Britain, we tend to say in between engagements. He said, doesn't that sound a little bit more vainglorious or much more pretty attire to it? So he said, there's definitely spells and words. And just thinking about the crisis that we're dealing with, not only in the United States, but around the world, food insecurity, water insecurity, land insecurity, the world is getting to be a smaller and smaller place. So you want to say something, Isaac?
Yeah. I mean, I want to learn a bit more about your background. I mean, you and I have known each other for a while now, but want to give the folks in the audience just a chance to learn more about who Mike Austin is. You mentioned that you were born and raised in the Bronx. So could you tell us more about, your childhood, what you wanted to be when you grow up? I remember some of the conversations we had, and they were pretty awesome.
Okay, so I'm the eldest of three. Basically, I guess you could say I was gifted as a child. I was fortunate enough to go to a parochial or Catholic school at a young age. I always excelled. My goal was to eventually be an astronaut. I wanted to be the first Black astronaut as a child. My father was career Navy. My grandparents, respectively, were one was in the Army, another one was in the Air Force. So it's strange to think where we are today as far as like socioeconomics, and for my family to be middle class, just certain things negated them from actually getting a house. My father qualified across the board to get GI Bills and own property, but it was just circumstances within this country and just within the psyche really negates certain people because of whatever color, socioeconomics, as I said before, from being able to achieve that. That doesn't mean that we didn't have. All of my siblings went to Catholic school. Unfortunately, my mom and dad separated when I was younger, and I ended up going to public school. And I like to say, I kind of think that led to some of my demise, because the things that you might see in a private school or the private sector of education, you may not see in public education. I tend to say that's one of the reasons why we have a lot of situations we have now with the youth and homelessness, and not only that, just being able to talk to people. One thing I've noticed being undomiciled is oftentimes you're treated less than for whatever reason. I'll get into that later on. But I mean, my family unit was, once my mom and dad separated, my grandparents were always there, my aunts and uncles were often there. My mother was a registered nurse, and she graduated top of her class back in the 50s. And it was strange because only seeing another person that looked like me in her class was something I wouldn't say stigmatized me, but it just often made me think.
So Mike, walk us through your early adult years and your middle adult years, and how you first came to experience homelessness.
Okay, so as I said, I was often advanced for my age. I never really dealt with people in my age group because I really felt that I couldn't learn too much from people in my age group. I was always shooting for the stars, which oftentimes led to me being ostracized because some people might think that I think I'm better than, or I know more than that other next individual, as opposed to just asking, well, how'd you get to where you are and what's your thought process, and uh, just breaking bread. When I was younger, it took a village to raise a child. I don't care if it was Willie the Wino or Dave the Dope Fiend, or somebody might be an aspiring Broadway artist or so on and so forth. Everybody you knew who your neighbors were. And it basically if I did something wrong, the whole neighborhood would let me know before I got home. And I'd still have disciplinary action when I get home. Some people like to call it capital punishment. I just call it parents doing what they're supposed to do as parents. Long story short, at the age of 12, my mother really didn't know what to do with me anymore because I was getting to that age. At 7, I stopped going to Catholic school. My mother had to put me in public school, which was kind of culture shock to me because I really wasn't familiar with what public school is. I was an altar boy at one time. I actually knew Latin at one time. These are lost arts, manuscript, or cursive handwriting. All this seems to be a lost art. So with 12, I started DJing. I started as a record man, actually, and this is back when they had vinyl records. So my mother, she gave me an ultimatum. She said, you have a curfew and you have a certain time to be home. Now, you could choose to abide by my rules and regulations, or if your friends are so much your family, go stay with your family. And one night I challenged my mother after coming home probably the week prior from seeing Tony Bennett at Carnegie Hall at 2, 3 in the morning. And the next time I did it, I came home, I think 4 in the morning from DJing, and the locks were changed, and basically my records and my personal belongings were sitting outside. So I'm not going to say that's what started it, but that was one of the first incidents of me being undomiciled.
So sorry to hear that, Mike. And where did it go from there, if I may ask?
So I'm not going to say it was a challenging time. It was a time of I'd say expanded learning, because at 12 years old I was making $125 an hour as a DJ, which was unheard of because this is 1975, 76. I'm not going to say it spiraled out of control, but I just had different experiences from the lifestyle of entertainment and being in that field. And then sadly, sometimes with that lifestyle comes different issues of substances. Drugs and alcohol were rampant in the clubs during that time period. I can't say that it's changed a lot, but I don't do the club scene anymore, so I really couldn't elaborate on that. But during that time period, even though those issues were at hand, I'm not going to say I embraced it, but it was just experimental because it's something I wasn't exposed to. Now, I'm not saying that there weren't issues within my family construct, because it's something about the military. You can't do any drugs, even though alcohol is a drug. And it seems like it's more acceptable to be alcoholic or whatever issue, underlying issue may be in the military. But as far as substances are concerned, I won't say that that's acceptable. At least during the time period I was dealing with family that were in the military.
Mm-hmm.
My father was basically in and out of my life. And I feel like sometimes that was his issue because he had lost a leg in the military. And dealing with that, I could imagine what it was like not only being in the Navy and then coming home and having to deal with just not only socioeconomics, but then you've been trained to do a job for the United States military. Good, bad, and different. there at that time period, unless you were going into law enforcement or using whatever trade you have learned in the military, there weren't too many outlets. My mother did the best she could with the three of us, and I commend her. Everybody has their own issues of trauma from their childhood. I won't elaborate what my mother's is, but everybody has issues. You know, and it's just what you do with those issues and what you do to get assistance. Not that it was a lot when I was coming up in the 70s and 80s. It seems to be more now, but then also that lies within the professionals that you deal with in said fields. I traveled a lot. By the time I hit 16, my mother really wasn't sure what to do with me. I'm not sure if she thought I was a pariah or I was a saint. So she ended up sending me to Job Corps at 16. I ended up in Clearfield, Utah. Well, I skipped a part. So during my period of DJing, my substance abuse issues became more prevalent. And then I ended up going to my first rehab at 16 years old. Which people go, oh my God, you're 16, how could that happen? Well, addiction is addiction is addiction. We could say it's drugs, but what's a drug? Food could be a drug, clothing, adrenaline, video games, drama, trauma. Some people may become addicted to that. And there's a saying I have, if you could sit around all day watching Jerry Springer or Maury, knowing the outcome of these shows, I mean, isn't that addiction also? So unfortunately, that addiction led me to my first rehab, and then my mother just said, you know what, I don't know what to do with you, and she sent me to Job Corps, which it was a blessing. I mean, I'm accustomed to traveling from my dad being in the Navy, and it was just a different venue and a different outlook on life. I've met people in my old neighborhood and other places I've been that say they need nothing but the same neighborhood. Yet still there's a whole world out there to explore and investigate.
What were you trained in Job Corps?
So Job Corps was trained as a clerk typist, and I ended up utilizing that later on in life, which is really crazy. This is pre-laptop, pre-home computers, and we still had typewriters back then. I'm trying to remember exactly what typewriter it was we were using. I think it was an old IBM Selectric, if I'm right. I got up to maybe 100 words a minute.
Wow.
Where we had somebody that came in and actually, he was a male and he typed 300 words a minute, which shocked me. Yeah. Yeah, he actually broke records, 300 words a minute. So from Job Corps, I ended up going to college. It was a junior college in La Junta, Colorado. And it's strange because some of the people I actually met in Job Corps in college, one of them, we ended up going to Grand Tetons in Wyoming for Easter break. So I got to see Wyoming, Montana, and Utah, and Colorado.
How was that?
It was, I mean, at 16, it was different because, I mean, just being from the city, all you see is the city. You might see upstate, but just to see just the Rocky Mountains and the Grand Tetons and the Midwest and the West, it wasn't so much culture shock, but actually it was because when I went in 1980, there weren't many hotels and resorts down there. There was maybe one little strip mall of hotels, one town restaurant, and then the ski resort. So it was an experience, you know. It's a blessing.
When did you make your way back to New York?
Actually, at 16, I got homesick, and my mother wasn't happy to see me, but she was tolerant. The home situation was still the same. Like, no, you're independent now. This is a choice you made. Live with it. They say the sins of the father are often put upon the son. So me being the eldest, I put a lot of flack and some of my mother's unresolved things.
And did your mother welcome you back into the home?
No, no. Basically, with Job Corps, they give you a certain amount of readjustment money for when you either graduate and complete the program or don't. And basically, I got my first place at 16, my first legal legit place. A friend was paying the rent for me, but I paid the rent in a timely manner and ended up getting back into DJing again. I think the second job I had, or third job I had, I was still DJing, but I think I got in courier work. I was a messenger at the time of DJing. And the DJing, that was one of the few jobs I really enjoyed. A lot of people actually keep asking me if I'm gonna get back into it. I said I have to think about that in this day and age. But
You remained a courier for a while, if I'm not mistaken.
I went from a foot courier to actually a bike messenger.
Mhm.
And I did that for about off and on for about 9-10 years.
Mhm.
Different jobs on the side. Always DJing was a base. I always kept that as a base, and it always. I was fortunate. It took me a lot of places. It taught me a lot of things. It actually got me into computers later on in life, from just the research and the technical aspects of it. I never formally went to college to take engineering or mechanics in that level, but there's a lot of behind the scenes work that I really wanted to get into. I ended up getting into photography, video work, and things of that nature. So it spun off, it just branched out into quite a few things. So I'm thankful.
You have a real artistic spirit to you.
Yeah, I think so. I tend to think so. That's one thing I also thank my mother for. As a child, I remember her always taking us to Broadway plays, off-Broadway plays, or she tried to get us into different TV shows that they were shooting. So, that's a blessing.
So moving on through your adult years, when was it that you really first began to experience homelessness in your adult years?
In my adult years, but I'd say my 20s going into my 30s, for as creative as I was, deal with depression issues, sometimes not thinking I was good enough. I didn't live up to my family's expectations, so on and so forth. And sometimes second guessing myself or questioning myself. And by the time I would say 25, 26, I really noticed that as happy as I was, I always felt like there was something missing. As much as I wanted to please my family, sometimes it seemed like it wasn't good enough. Just issues with my siblings. It's funny how when my mom and dad finally really separated for good, my sister ended up staying with my mother, and my brothers ended up staying with my dad. And I was a lone wolf or a black sheep, so to speak. Off and on, I might have had substance abuse issues, and I really started focusing on my mental health and what I need to do to take care of myself. Family was always there. Like my mother's side of the family is actually from the deep South. They're actually from the Virginia area, the same area where right now there's issues with statues being removed and flags being removed. But I remember as a child, the last time I was actually in Virginia was when I was 7 years old, 1970, still riding the back of the bus. And I know where my family is from on my mom's side, there's limited power. I actually remember using the outhouse as a child. And it's just weird that as much as we change as people, things don't change. My last time actually going to rehab was in the 90s. It was an option of getting myself together and just finally saying enough is enough, or, just staying in what I describe as a cushy hell. I'm doing bad, but I'm not doing as bad as you are. And I'm thankful for it because actually that rehab really saved my life and changed my life. I've done what I can to help family, friends, and advocate. But after a while, I finally woke up and said, you know what, if I don't put me first, I could put the S on my chest and want to save the rest of the world. But if I'm not saving myself first, what good is that? And what example am I leading? Fast forward to 1999, actually, I ended up completing that rehab. I stayed in long term to deal with my issues and came back. And I'm leaving a couple of parts out. So my ex-fiance was actually responsible for me getting into this rehab. And she was a clinical supervisor and had no idea that I had any issues. I was really a good functional addict. I've learned people pleasing and trying to live up to what I thought at my time with my friends' expectations. We're really just living up to people's expectations that might have been around just a party or take advantage of certain situations. It's really ironic that the same people I met at 12 that I knew up until my 30s, I don't even know if half of them are still alive right now. I know out of 20 people, I know 2 or 3 are really successful. One's a successful photographer. Another one, he was a successful actually school teacher. And then the rest of the people are missing in action. One thing I can say about being undomiciled or homeless, people get a bad rap. I know my personal experience, since COVID hit, I was staying at a safe haven, but I'm leaving parts out again. So let me back up. So 99, my father passed away, which really shocked me because during that time period, I'd speak to my family sporadically, but for just the reasons from me leaving at a younger age and then just that never being resolved between family and just assumptions that he still has that issue, he's never going to get rid of that issue. That stigmatism followed me throughout life with my family, irregardless of all the good I might have done. And I'm not one of those people that frequent going back and forth to jail. I really barely have a criminal record. Just taking advantage and realizing that I'm fortunate to be where I am. And, knowing the issues my father had, knowing the issues my mother had, not taking sides and just realize family is family. It is what it is. My father passed away from hypertension and unresolved alcoholism issues and things of that nature. And it just took me as a shock because I lost my grandparent, one of my grandparents, and my grandmother actually, she didn't pass until 95. And she was 95 years of age. And just looking at the dynamic that you need each member of your family to really, for it to be a structure in a family. And that basis, that foundation can actually lead to either one being successful or one not getting past that or trying to live up to the expectation. I want my children to have better than I had. Sometimes I still try to figure that out, like, had things been different. But I noticed that time period, I kind of went to, I'm not going to say a funk, but it just,
Right after your father died, this is.
Pardon me?
Right after your father died,
Yeah.
this is.
So I got into deep depression because I felt like I always wanted that unification or that unity between my siblings, and it never was going to happen the way I wanted it to happen. I took it kind of hard and I just kept working. At that point, I was working 3 jobs and ridiculous hours, and I'm barely sleeping. And even sponsors and friends of mine were like, Mike, you either end up relapsing or you're going to burn yourself out. I worked myself into, like, I think 2 or 3 vacations almost simultaneously on each job. And I think for a month, I just stayed at home and nobody could get in touch with me. And it wasn't even a relapse issue. It was just mentally I shut down. Like, I just couldn't understand the dynamic with why can't we be a family structure? As it was, as much as it might have been dysfunctional when I was a child, I always wanted to be that dynamic that I would see on television, like the Brady Bunch or something of that nature. Fast forward, basically, it seemed like the calm before the storm. 9/11 hit and ended up being a first responder. I was still working at the time, and for some reason, I ended up volunteering. And I think I worked maybe a week or 2 in the hole, and I wasn't built like that. So I ended up getting the food service, and I worked in Nino's restaurant down on Canal Street. In 2002, I actually left and relocated to the South. And the region I moved to the South was—
We're in the South.
So this is Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana area.
Got it.
And I just wasn't ready for the culture shock of that region, not knowing what it was like. And everything's different for everybody. I'm not gonna badmouth the area I lived in. Part of racial tensions and issues down there were really something I had experienced since I was a child. I was fortunate. I ended up working for a few agencies down there, got into advocacy work, and started doing computer programming classes for people and computer literacy, did peer-to-peer support. And I just, 2009, relocated back to New York because a family member needed some assistance. Unfortunately, that family member suffers from dementia now, and it just wasn't prevalent at that time that I didn't know. And my brother kept telling me that there was an issue with my mother, and that was the person I was trying to help. So I think I stayed with her a year or two upon returning, trying to assist her with her issues, and I couldn't do it, so I ended up undomiciled in New York, which really surprised me because I didn't know the rents and real estate prices had increased over that 7-year period I was gone.
And what's your experience like being undomiciled during that time?
It was strange because the first year or two I was doing really good. I was working, I was saving money, and I was
You
trying to
stayed on the
find.
street or in a shelter during that time?
Well, the first 2 years I'd stayed with my mother, but at that time period, I knew it wasn't feasible for me to stay with her, because of her issues, some mental health issues, and I tried to get help. I called so many different agencies in the city, and they said if she refuses to help, that's a choice and option. If there's nothing they could basically do, so I left it up to another family member to deal with the issue, and unfortunately, they're in denial. They don't really think that my mom has an issue, but for the grace of God, go on. So I couldn't afford to get basically what I would refer to as a sleeping room. A lot of people don't know the term homelessness is a lot deeper than what it seems. So basically, in the state of New York, if your name isn't on a lease or deed of property, you're homeless. Why the laws are that way, I have no idea. I've stayed with friends, and then it could be a situation where they might want more rent. I can only give as much as I can afford and try to budget and save enough to get, but now it's just the rent. Sometimes you might have to pay so much up front, security deposit, and so on and so forth, and credit ratings. And they've done what they can to change laws, but still, even with vouchers in New York, through the DHS system, and it's such an uphill battle.
Absolutely.
My go on.
No, go ahead, Mike.
My experience is if you don't love this job and you really don't care for people, please don't get into this field. Too many people are suffering and dying. My personal experience has been, I was in a place that was supposed to be a safe haven. Ran about 4 of the top agencies in the city to just supposed to be combating homelessness. I've had the program director tell me directly that homeless people have no rights. I've had staff that come in during the day. You don't know whether they're there or not. They'll come in and get a weekly paycheck, and you might not see them for 2 weeks or a month. I've had an executive director from one program constantly be in every step of whatever I did. It seemed like whenever anything was going in her staff's favor, it was okay. But if you have a complaint or grievance, you might end up in a place worse than what you're supposed to be. I'm fortunate through your assistance, through the team over at CUCS in Harlem. I'm gonna mention both of their names, Isabella Polite and Francesca Beltran. I want to thank both of them, because if it wasn't for them, I wouldn't have transitioned to a single room now. It might not be better than what I had, but is definitely a step up. I want to also thank the team at Urban Justice Center, River Wasserman, Peter Malvan, and oh gosh, Maria's gonna kill me. my friend Maria, she's gonna kill me, from the Urban Justice Center, and the team at CUCS, just going above and beyond. You know, oftentimes when you do find staff that really care about their position and their frontline workers, I don't understand why they don't have unions, why they don't have the representation that they need, why they don't have the protection that they need. Fran and Isabella, they're women and they're out canvassing, trying to assist people that are undomiciled 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. And oftentimes they might start out with 10 or 20 people on their caseload, and then within a month's time, they have 300 people on their caseload. One person, I don't get it. I see a lot of agencies burning up money where taxpayers complain they don't want any homeless people in their neighborhood. If they knew the amount of money that was being wasted, I can't comprehend it, because we're talking about people's lives.
Yeah. I mean, Mike, I hear every day about caseworkers who have caseloads, of 30 or more people. I mean, it's really difficult. If you were working, 70 hours a week, which is completely unsustainable. And if you had 35 people on your caseload, at most, you would have only 2 hours a week to devote to each person. And these are cases that are so complex and that require such attention that 2 hours, you're just not going to cut it. So folks are overworked.
Definitely underpaid, not appreciated. Upper echelon, I see them get all the kudos, but I see very little of them doing the job that needs to be done. I mean, I challenge anybody in political office, in upper echelon office of these different agencies. I challenge you, leave your credentials home and go stay in the shelter for a month with no credentials, with nobody knowing who you are.
Mike, tell us a tiny bit about your experience within the shelter system. And, if you can, explain why so many people prefer to stay on the streets than rather in the shelter system.
Honestly, I see no safety in the shelter system. I see more protection for the people that make some rules and regulations. I see more protections for the people that actually provide the medications, or they don't even suggest or ask you what are your goals. Basically, it's just, I'll transfer you from here to either transitional housing or a stabilization bed. And it seems my personal experience has been, who do I talk to if I need assistance with certain things? And the team that I'm working with doesn't provide it. The team that I was dealing with in Brooklyn when I was staying at the Safe Haven, there was a space with 54 beds in it. And what I don't understand is, basically, it was like you just gave the keys to the people to the asylum. Like I had people that might have shot IV drugs, and that wasn't my thing. I've had people smoke K2. That wasn't my thing. The only reason I moved into the safe haven I was in, because I was guaranteed my own room. When you get put into a space with somebody you're not familiar with, there's already trauma from potentially being on the street or being on domicile. Here's a situation I understand. With the climate being what it is, if it was a Hurricane Katrina or another Superstorm Sandy, and those people might have lived in Far Rockaway, now they're homeless. They might have been homeowners. But because I'm in a situation where I stay in the shelter, and that's another thing people might not realize, New York is the last, what they call sanctuary state, where you actually can come to services and be provided shelter. My experience is, I feel safer on the street because I don't have to deal with all of everybody else's issues, and then the staff that doesn't care. Because if I could walk in and day out and act like that person doesn't exist, or their needs don't matter, why am I in this field? It's like the Hippocratic Oath, but it seems to be the hypocritical oath. If I had enough money, this wouldn't be an issue. But it's like they're putting a Band-Aid basically on a mass shooting. Like the welfare system and the housing system in New York hasn't changed too much since the 70s, except maybe there's been an influx of people into New York, but real estate prices have reached a level where the homeless situation is only critically worse because most people work in 2 or 3 jobs just to try to keep food on the table and a roof over their head. That's for, I'm thinking in terms of a single person. I'm not even talking about somebody with family. My experience is I feel safer on the street because I don't know whether the staff cares. And then it's your word against the staff. Now, if the staff labels you either combative or unstable, what they say MICA unit, mentally unstable and chemically addicted. People might have this issue, maybe they need a specialized unit, a MICA unit. But then if I'm somebody who's just attempting to be working class and productive member of society, and I'm dealing with somebody whose issues may be stronger than mine, maybe I'm not able to deal with that. Maybe mentally that's something, that's a challenge for me, I shouldn't have to deal with. That's up to staff. So why should I have to deal with that? And if I'm on my own or living undomiciled in the street, unfortunately, sometimes I feel safe in the street than actually with dealing with all of these issues, especially when staff refuse to deal with the issues. And that's their job. Well, that's a job they chose to take.
Mike, you're so incredibly resilient, just being through everything that you've been through. And I know you personally, so I'm continually amazed by your ability to just put one foot in front of the other and, maintain a positive attitude. And, really just inspire those around you, honestly. I mean, I am really amazed by it. And really, I'm curious to hear how you're able to just maintain that attitude and just keep putting one foot in front of the other.
I can't speak for everyone. I don't speak for everyone when I advocate. I speak from my experience. I speak from people that I've dealt with, that I've met. And it's not easy. I mean, I look around now and I'm just like, not only is the United States in chaos and the shelter system in chaos, but the whole world is in chaos. And it seems like every time there's another natural disaster, there's another part of the world that's affected, but then it still affects us. I mean, after Superstorm Sandy, I really would have thought that city, not only city officials, but just people in general, their attitude would change for the better. I mean, we only got one planet, so where are we going to? Sadly, I really think that a lot of politicians are disconnected just because of the climate. I'm not even going to get into the whole semantics of Republican, Democrat, blah, 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 yada, yada, yada. At the end of the day, people are dying out here.
Well, in the face of all that, how do you just keep going forward? I mean, for most folks, these would just be, it's a lot to just really get down about, especially when, personal circumstances are so challenging and difficult.
See, I was so blessed this past Sunday, I turned 59. I think about and I didn't even realize that somebody told me, this October 30th, that was the 10th anniversary of Superstorm Sandy. I said, no, that was a memorial. That's not an anniversary. You're not supposed to celebrate something of that magnitude. I try to think, what would it be like if I don't walk in your shoes, Isaac? You're a great man, but I don't know if I can face your challenges, and I wouldn't dare you to face my challenges. I just think, what if we didn't have people like you that really cared and gave people an opportunity? And I'm like, if I have this opportunity, why shouldn't I take it? Why shouldn't I think about the next person? That's the way I was raised, regardless of what I've been through, regardless of my skin color. I had a little kid tell me once, and he was 5 or 6 years old. He said, Mike, if the whole world was blind, we wouldn't have had the problems we have because we'd be too busy stepping on each other's toes. So, and it's just, it takes a village. Like when I see people pushing their dog or their cat around in a baby carriage, I have an issue with that because I see tourists taking selfies with people that are undomiciled. But then they'll say, oh, it's a mental health issue. Well, there's a lot of people that's in affluent positions with mental health issues, but I don't see them being thrown under the bus. So now you're just using the homeless as a scapegoat. Sure, there are people with severe issues that are unfortunately undomiciled. But then if you're in a position to change it, or you're in a position to help, Why are you sitting there just labeling them making money off?
So let's dig a tiny bit deeper on that. I want to hear from you what you think, number one, the average citizen could do to help those who are experiencing homelessness. Number two, what you think service providers and government officials should be doing to help those experiencing homelessness.
I'm not going to say to the general public, it's your job and your duty to go out there and approach every person who's on domicile, because I don't know what that person might be going through that day. Get involved with a church group or a group in general that may provide services. See what that group is about before you go donating a ton of money to that group, because you never know if they're on the up and up or if they're doing something, that's not above board. If each one teach one, maybe you might pass somebody who is, hospitable and might, you might want to befriend and see what the situation is. Come by Broadway Presbyterian, you can volunteer here. Get involved. Just get involved in your neighborhood. I mean, maybe you have a family member or a friend of a friend who might be dealing with being undomiciled. Start baby steps. That's the best way to describe it, baby steps. I'm not going to go sticking my hand in the cage at the zoo.
Sure. What do you think service providers should be doing?
You know what? I get aggravated because some service providers hide behind this 1996 law called HIPAA. And the crazy thing about the HIPAA law is basically by law, I can't release your medical records. So they can hide behind that sometimes. I'm not saying that it's fair. I think they should be held to a higher standard. The same way law enforcement should be held to a higher standard. I think service providers, the same way that people complaining about a certain war going on at this point in time, I think that service providers, if they have this job, and you're dealing with people with so many issues, before your caseload hits 300, what are you doing with that one person? Because I see select groups that may have a success story, but for the most part, I see a lot of service providers, they want you to stay in the system. Because honestly, if we solve homelessness tomorrow, how many people are going to be unemployed? And I'm like, don't we have more issues to deal with right now? I mean, this is nothing new. Being undomiciled is nothing new. I remember in the 70s when they had welfare hotels. It seems like now not-for-profit agencies and NGOs make more money when they could cut out the middleman, let an individual that's truly wanting to get their life together go back to school, take a trade, and all that money that's being wasted month to month could actually be Habitat for Humanity, sweat equity. If you really want to get yourself together, don't sit around and complain, do something about it. And if you can't, I get so discouraged with New York City, you can call 311 until you're blue in the face. But there's so many people are being warehoused. That's the issue I have. Tons of money being poured into this issue, but nothing's changed. Government, it's not like government doesn't know. How many mayors have we had in New York and the situation has just become more dire? Now we have children dying, elders dying, people with we can go from shelter system to the foster care system to the judicial system. Why is it you spend a ton of money to put somebody in jail or a ton of money to warehouse somebody in a shelter, but then it's like, where's the solution? And I just don't get it, because the quality of life is not great. I mean, matter of fact, I challenge anybody that's a service provider, go stay in one of the shelters you work at. Leave your credentials home, go stay in one of the shelters that you work at. And I'm not talking about a day or a week or a couple of days, or one of those little photo ops. No, go stay or go ride the train for a month. Go do the same service that you provide us. Let us provide that service to the service providers and see how quickly everything changed. I just don't understand how people can go home at night and sleep comfortably. You know, nobody would trade places. Not one person is a service provider would trade places. You know, and I don't see too many success stories. It's just like a continual revolving door of like, okay, we're going to help you get housing, but then long as it's something that belongs to whatever service provider, whether it be A, B, and C, you'll go from this stabilization bed and you'll stay here forever. How many years is vouchers for? I mean, I met people that it's supposed to be 3 years transitional. You're supposed to transition from this spot to your own apartment. 7, 8, 9, 10 years in the same place, but it's supposed to be a 3-year transitional situation. And government agency, I don't know what city government's doing that they don't understand. What is DHS, Department of Homeless Services, doing? I don't see it. I don't. I see more security. There's more security where I'm at than it probably is at the airport right now. I mean, there's a list of probably 30 things that we can't have. And it's just, where does it end? Where does it end? I mean, I remember this from childhood, and I came from a decent family. So what is, and people are being priced out in New York. How do we have an area? I'm in the area where I'm staying at in the transitional bed, just in the Great White Way. I'm right down the block from Broadway plays. How do I have an area called Billionaires Row? Billionaires Row, 100,000 square feet, $100,000 for 1 square foot of property. I don't understand that. This is the most richest, affluent city one of them in the world. What happened? How was it during COVID? We had 3 billionaires go to the edge of space, but we can't solve homelessness. I don't get that. I mean, it's like a sad, it's like a George Carlin or Richard Pryor movie, and we're the joke. Like, I just don't get it. They'll spend tons of money and write these blank checks and do the North Star Fund and Robinhood.org, but where's the money going?
Mike, what's one thing you want people to know about homelessness? If there's one thing you had to choose, what would it be?
Don't think it can't happen to you. I know so many workers, and like I said, let's say at the very top, that upper echelon, I know workers that are 1 paycheck away, literally. I know a case manager that's collecting food stamps. But yet they come into work and try to help me with my situation. And why is it, if a person wants to be a productive member of society, they get this label. Remember what I said, words are spells. They'll get a label or stereotype. And then because I want to be a productive member of society, that makes me a bad guy. Now, on the flip side of that, I know people have either been formerly incarcerated or might not be able to get away from that substance abuse issue. Now, if they decide they want to go and do the wrong thing, the same way Wall Street does from time to time, like I said, stereotypes and labels. If you do it on Wall Street, it's acceptable. But if you're sadly in a situation where you're undomiciled, now you have mental health issues, you know, you're disadvantaged, you're the bottom of the barrel, so on and so forth. I want people to understand, the more issues we have with the changing climate, not only with people, but without this planet, this little globe, the world is becoming a smaller and smaller place with every disaster we have. I just turned 59. I never remember a hurricane going from Florida all the way up to Canada. I never remember that. So there's something definitely going on with this planet. And the more issues we have with the environment, you may end up being homeless sooner than you think. So, as they say, judge not lest ye be judged. I'm not one to get heavy into religion, but if we don't start treating each other better, we only got one planet. Who wants to be homeless? Who wants to be undomiciled? Who wants to sleep in the street? Who wants to have mental health issues? Who wants to be treated like they don't deserve to be treated? And it's just, you know what? How would you want to be treated if you were in this situation? That's how I put it. Do you want to be treated like you're a human being? Or do you want your dog or cat being pushed around in a baby carriage while somebody's taking a selfie with you thinking it's a joke? We're dealing with people's lives. I mean, come on. We all got an expiration date. You want to do the right thing or you want to do the wrong thing. Treat people the way you want to be treated. If not, leave this field alone. Please. Please.
Mike, I want to ask you one more question before we close off for the night. Where do you see yourself, or where do you want to be in 1 year, 5 years, 10 years?
Wow. So I'm gonna be honest. Where we're at right now, we're not too far from Grant's Tomb and Riverside Drive. There's something called van life. I actually had a plan to buy an old bus or van and customize it because it seems it's not viable to own property anymore. Because actually you really don't own it, it's eminent domain. Honestly, I would like to say in the next 2 or 3 years, I'd like to be doing encryption and possibly, you know, running my own business. I have a few challenges and hurdles to overcome. I would like to say I really see that as being viable. Now I'm thinking about, do I even want to stay in the United States anymore? Just because of the climate in this country and just because I've never seen the animosity against each person now. And just these labels and this anger and just, I mean, for me, it's unpredictable because I'm not too sure where I'm gonna be in the next week or two. And truthfully, after going through what I went through 2 years in the safe haven, and I have to start all over again, I really just want a cabin in the woods. I hate to be facetious, but I mean, at this point in time, I want a piece of land in the middle of nowhere, live off the grid. And I know that seems to be the new catchphrase, but I really can't afford to live in New York anymore, even when I get back home. I wouldn't live in New York. I know people commuting 3-4 hours away, driving 6 hours a day just to get back and forth to work, to live in an area relatively safe. I really would love to start my own business. I've even started working on LLC information and, you know, looking at what I want to do. But honestly, I know this isn't it. I can't keep depending on the system, especially with the challenges going on. And I don't see a lot of hope at the end of the tunnel trying to survive in the system because people think we're living. Me personally, I feel like I'm surviving because I don't know what it is day to day. I mean, the region I'm in, basically where I'm at is transitional. I can't have a refrigerator. I don't like eating microwave food. The area I'm in is a tourist area. So I went and bought 12 items the other day. They came to $72. I'm like, I can't do this every day. That's not viable. So, but definitely I am getting back to encryption and just, you know, moving forward. I just try to stay positive and just keep focused, you know, keep my head up. I mean, I would love to be able to do this. If I could do this on a monthly basis as a seminar, just to uncover different topics, I wouldn't mind doing public speaking too, because I really feel like a lot of people really need to know what's going on, not just my story. I mean, what's your story? You know, it's not about me, because at the end of the day, like I said, we all got an expiration date, you know, so I don't know what mine is, but I want to try to be the best I can before, you know, my time comes. So.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for, you know, sharing your story and, you know, for allowing me to ask these questions this evening and for being so vulnerable and genuine with us. We really, really appreciate it. I've learned a bunch from you.
Thanks.
Not just this evening, but, you know, the last several months. I really appreciate you. Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Isaac, and thanks for the opportunity. I hope we can do it again sometime.
Absolutely, we will.
All right, have a great night. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, guys.